Hi, I'm Shane Croucher of IBTimes UK and I'm in Westminster to speak with the Housing and Planning Minister, Brandon Lewis. Hello Brandon, thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Pleasure.
First things first, do you accept that there's a housing crisis in the UK?
I've been quite open with the fact we have not built enough houses in this country for a very long time, probably 2 or 3 decades, if not more. We do need to be building more houses, there's no doubt about that.
And what's your diagnosis of the state of the UK housing market? Is it just fundamentally a supply issue or are there other problems lurking around?
Well, I think one of the things with the housing market is it's a very complicated market with a lot of different sectors. So we can't look and think there is one issue that's causing a problem or one silver bullet that's going to fix it. And I think we've got to be quite clear about where we've come from. In 2010, when we came into government, Labour left us with the lowest house building numbers since about 1923. So we've had a big rebuilding job to do. That, with the economic crash as well, meant that people couldn't borrow to buy, builders couldn't borrow to build, and everything was struggling. The planning system had become top down and heavy, and people were arguing over numbers. So lots of different things were not delivering houses. What we've done is reform the planning process, so we've got it now locally driven, and in the last year we delivered pretty much record number of planning permissions. But we also got the money coming through so that people could buy. We've got help to buy going that also then gives confidence to the builders, because people can buy, then the builders will build for them. So there's been an awful lot of work along that pathway. So we're now back to building at the levels we saw back in 2007, and we are now on a trajectory to be building about 200,000 homes a year by 2017.
That's still quite a way short of what's needed though. I mean, I think demand, it depends what figures you look at, but it can go anywhere up to 320,000 a year that we need to be building. So, I mean, essentially what you're saying is we're still not going to be building enough homes come 2020.
Well, you're right, there's lots of different estimates of what the right building level should be. I think what we've got to be very clear about is, and the reason I don't do the whole target thing, is actually setting a target we're going to build X number of homes a year misses out on the really key fact. We've got to make sure we're building the right homes of the right tenure in the right places for the right people. And by that, what I mean is whether somebody wants shared equity, whether they want the private rented sector, whether they want to buy outright, whether they want to buy a starter home, the new 20% discount scheme that we're going to run, whether they need affordable or social housing. We've got to make sure we're providing the right homes for those people in the right parts of the country and in the right places. And that's why local decision making over planning is so important as part of the package.
On the point about local decision making and planning, I mean, the house builders consistently say that planning is still an issue for them. I know the government's launched its red tape challenge and it's tried to reform the planning law, but quite a lot of your critics say that actually the progress has been far too slow on planning reform, and you've still got a lot of NIMBYism, and essentially builders aren't being allowed to build as much as they're saying they could build if they didn't have such obstruction in the planning law. So why is it taking you so long to pick through the planning laws and liberalise them?
Well, it hasn't, actually. One of the first things we did in government was the Localism Bill, that became the Localism Act. That brought in the National Planning Policy Framework, moved much more to local plans, with neighbourhood plans as well being introduced with that. And what we did was we stripped away some 7,000 pages of planning guidance and regulations and got that MPPF that's just 50 pages. In fact, even this year we've produced a plain English guide to planning as well, so anybody can read it and understand it. And that's paid dividends, and this is where I'm not sure I entirely agree with you. And having just today spoken at the Home Builders Federation, the planning group, as well as a conference today, and just a couple of days ago with housing associations as well, the planning system is not actually what builders are now saying is the issue. The biggest challenge to the construction industry is the skill shortage. And the reason I say that, and I can evidence that with planning, is the change we made in planning means that we've just had at the end of 2014 a pretty much record number of planning permissions approved. 253,000 homes, that's over 690 a day, got planning permission in 2014. And that's because we're trusting local people. And what that's doing is getting local people involved in the planning process gives them confidence over the fact that the homes they will get are the homes that they need and are appropriate for them, in the right places, in the right structure, with the right infrastructure as well. And that's giving confidence to people. And that's why people's acceptance and support for development has shot up to about 57% when it was very, very low back in even 2012.
One of the biggest or most contentious issues in planning law is green belt. And the government is pretty clear that it wants to maintain the green belt where it can, but and I think in its own guidance it says, you know, unmet housing need is unlikely to outweigh the benefits of the green belt and maintaining the green belt. But are we not being too dogmatic about the green belt and actually need to start thinking that developers need land, there's a lot of land around our cities, and we should be allowing our cities to sprawl further, particularly in London, to meet the housing need.
Actually, I think what we find is what people don't want is that kind of urban sprawl and just continual growing where we lose actually part of what makes this country so quintessentially British, which is that wonderful countryside that we enjoy. And the green belt was there for a very specific reason. It was that green lung around communities so that one village, one town, one urban area doesn't just merge into the next one. There are defined villages, areas and towns. So I think it's very important, but I go further now. I mean, one thing I will say about the planning system, what I think is fair, is we do want to speed it up further, the process side of it. It's why we've just done a consultation on what we call Section 106 agreements. That actually is one of the things that slows things down occasionally. It's not the planning per se, it's that agreement over a Section 106 agreement. I want to do something about that. But what I would say about the building side of it, I think brownfield, there is still a lot further we can go. We've said we've got a target to deliver planning permission on 90% of the brownfield land that we've identified by 2020. The Council for Protection of Rural England, who I've worked with over the last 6-9 months, they believe they can identify some 1.5 million properties that can be built on brownfield land. That's a lot of homes and a big chunk towards the sort of levels we want to see built over the next 5 years. Now, there will be some of that 1.5 million that are potentially unviable or difficult to build out, but we've identified 200,000. They think it's 1.5 million, and I'll be working with them to make sure we get to that point in those 1.5 million, to make sure we develop every single part of that we can before we start touching that wonderful green belt. But ultimately, and this is a really important factor with green belt, it's up to local councils. It's not for a suit or somebody in a shirt in Whitehall to decide what areas do. It's very much up to a local authority. Local authorities accountable to local residents who know their area best, know what they need and what's right for them, can make that assessment, evidence it and make their decision locally.
But sometimes they don't make decisions that are right for the whole community. The planning system is used to block developments that will perhaps, people don't want houses built in their backyard, that sort of thing, NIMBYism. So if you devolve too much power to the local authority, actually you give too much control perhaps to the bureaucrats who just want to block development, when actually we need housing, we need someone to come through and be forthright.
I appreciate the argument you're putting, but the evidence completely refutes that. Because moving to this local system, trusting local people, as I said, has now delivered 253,000 planning permissions last year alone. That's pretty much a record level. What we did have when you had a top-down target system that was very bureaucratically led, and I was a councillor in those days, I remember being on the other side of it, was people spent so much time arguing over the numbers, they didn't actually build any houses. And that's why Labour missed their targets year after year for the best part of 13 years. Probably why they've given so many different targets in the last 12 months as well. So I'm very much more focused on making sure we trust local people. And it's not just the issue about delivering the planning permissions, it's making sure it's the right homes, whether it's start homes for young people, older homes, bungalows for older people, affordable homes, social homes. Local areas know what they need.
On trusting local people and social housing, if you trust local councils so much, why don't you get rid of the borrowing cap so that they can borrow as much as they want to invest in council housing that they need?
Well, there's a couple of things there. Actually, it's not about trusting the local authorities. The borrowing levels for local authorities in terms of their HRA account for that actually has an effect on the public sector borrowing requirements. So the Treasury has to keep a level of control over that to protect the public purse, to keep those low interest rates that everybody is now, who's buying a home, got a mortgage and got a loan, is benefiting from. I think that's a very important part of our control of the public sector debt. Having said that, a couple of years ago there was still over £2 billion of headroom that councils were not using, and just last summer, for those councils who have gone the whole way and have used up their headroom, we made £300 million available for them to bid into, to say, look, we want to go further and do more. And we're still taking bids for that. So councils who want to go further, who can put the case for it, we always have an open door to talk to them to make sure we facilitate. And that's partly why we're now having councils building council houses at the fastest rate we've seen in 23 years. And actually, in the last 4 and a bit years, 5 years of this Parliament, we've built more council houses than the entire 13 years of the previous administration.
Last of all, what can we expect from the Conservative Party manifesto in terms of housing? Is there going to be anything radical in there?
Well, as tempting as this interview is to launch the Conservative Party's housing manifesto, I will resist that urge just a little bit at the moment. But we are very clear and very focused. What I will say is we are very clear, very focused about the fact that housing is an important part of the economy. It delivers jobs, it drives our economy, it's hugely important to GDP, and it is also true that we need to deliver homes for people right across the country, right across all these different parts of the housing sector. So housing and the delivery of housing will remain absolutely a key focus of our long-term economic plan.